Tonight, political cover for poorly written laws.
It's allowing a different type of government to form alongside the constitutional infrastructure that we've come to appreciate.
We break down the Chevron doctrine and why the Supreme Court could deliver Washington lawmakers a serious blow by getting rid of it. Plus, the race for the White House heats up this summer, the latest from the campaign trail. And how a surprise box office hit is bringing the issue of human trafficking to light.
My phone is blowing up every single day with all the questions and people wanting to ask those questions.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. As Congress investigates ethics on the Supreme Court, justices get ready to hear a case that could upend how lawmakers do business. Good evening in Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. The politics of policymaking often lead to unelected federal bureaucrats having power over the lives of everyday Americans, imposing regulations and the rules to fit their needs. That may be about to change, though. The Supreme Court will soon hear a case that could finally rein in federal bureaucracy. Jennifer Wishon has tonight's top story.
Commercial fishermen have long been uncomfortable with a law that lets government monitors board their vessels to observe the fish they catch. Fishermen say if that wasn't bad enough, the National Marine Fisheries Service passed a rule that requires them to pay the wages of the monitors, who are taking a seat on their boats that could otherwise go to a paying customer, a burden that can add up to a whopping $700 every day.
There's going to be plenty of trips that monitor will make more than myself or my crew.
Stephen Axelson and other herring fishermen from Cape May, New Jersey sued over the rule, and their case will be heard before the Supreme Court, where it will be argued by famed appellate lawyer Paul Clement.
When you have the federal government directly regulating small businesses, it's just not a fair fight.
But instead of just hearing the specifics of this case alone, justices have chosen to take on the bigger issue by reviewing the power of the entire federal bureaucracy, specifically considering one of the most important and powerful principles in the world of bureaucratic rulemaking, known as the Chevron doctrine. It comes from a 1984 case in which the High Court developed a rule for lower courts to follow that says if a law passed by Congress isn't clear or is silent on a given issue, then courts should accept what a government agency thinks that law means. That High Court ruling gave Washington bureaucracies wide latitude over the years to come with their own interpretations of various laws, potentially strengthening their own powers.
I mean, in a system where we're trying to protect the liberty of the individuals, you would think that the rule is if the statute's unclear, the tie ought to go to the citizen, not that the tie ought to go to the government.
The Chevron doctrine is so interwoven into American case law, it's been cited more than 80,000 times. A decision by the Supreme Court to scrap it would send shockwaves through the halls of Congress and the White House, potentially upending the way both branches implement policy. That's because they both use Washington's massive administrative state to their advantage. Congress often passes vague laws, leaving the details up to federal bureaucrats, a process that gives members political cover when the final product ends up hurting well-meaning citizens. Presidents also use agencies to bypass Congress to advance their agendas. In fact, the current court has already shown its frustration with the Chevron doctrine. In a 2013 dissent, Chief Justice Roberts wrote, "The administrative state with its reams of regulations would leave the founders rubbing their eyes," and continued, "The danger posed by the growing power of the administrative state cannot be dismissed." But James Goodwin with the Center for Progressive Reform warns getting rid of Chevron altogether could invite chaos and even judicial activism if judges, inexperienced in administrative law, are given room to impose their policy preferences for that of Congress's. He tells CBN News, "That's like having baseball umpires figuring out the finer contours of what constitutes a reception in the NFL. That is no way to run a legal system." Fitzhenry argues the power of federal agencies should be put back under the Constitution, no longer operating as a parallel government run by unelected bureaucrats.
When we as average citizens tolerate that, however slowly, it's allowing a different type of government to form alongside the constitutional infrastructure that we've come to appreciate.
He points to the Department of Labor's COVID-19 vaccine mandate for certain employers that caused such a stir. It was a rule made by a federal agency that affected a huge number of Americans, and many argue blatantly violated their constitutional rights. At that time, Congress was in session and had the ability to make such a requirement, but chose not to. And studies show agencies win in lower courts more often than not.
You know, it's hard enough to call your congressperson and get their attention, but try getting a hold of some regulator at the National Marine Fisheries Service or the Environmental Protection Agency or fill in the blank. And you know, they're not responsive.
The Supreme Court could completely scrap Chevron or just weaken it after it hears arguments in its next term. Whatever the outcome, the ruling could affect Americans in all walks of life for decades to come. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, the Supreme Court.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. And as the Supreme Court looks at how lawmakers do business, those same lawmakers have been doing just the same to the justices. Now, Justice Elena Kagan says Congress has the power to regulate ethics of those who sit on the nation's highest bench, noting Congress already determines court funding and jurisdiction. Kagan recently said Congress can, quote, do various things to regulate the Supreme Court. That is something many Republican lawmakers disagree with.
We've got 3 branches of government, and the court can attend to this. This is not our place.
A recent Quinnipiac poll found 56% of Americans disapprove of the current Supreme Court. Prior to the August recess, the Senate Judiciary Committee moved forward with legislation that would impose ethics restrictions on the justices. When lawmakers return to Washington, the measure is unlikely to gain enough Republican support to go anywhere. Former President Trump is calling on the Supreme Court to intervene in his growing pile of criminal legal cases, claiming election interference. On Truth Social, Trump writes his 3 current indictments come at the hands of his political opponents, saying, quote, resources that would have gone into ads and rallies will now have to be spent fighting these radical left thugs in numerous courts throughout the country. I am leading in all polls, including against Crooked Joe, but this is not a level playing field. It is election interference, and the Supreme Court must intercede. Some Maryland parents are taking their fight against LGBTQ inclusive books to federal court. A group of multi-faith religious parents in Montgomery County want the ability to opt out of having their elementary-age children read storybooks with what they see as extremist ideology, saying it's, quote, forced inculcation. Their case will go before the U.S. District Court for Maryland on Wednesday. Will Hahn is senior counsel with Beckett Law and will argue that case. And Will joins us now. Will, welcome. So in similar situations in the past, arguments have been made that these are just conservative parents, Christian parents who want Christian agendas taught in schools. What does it say that this case is a group of multi-faith parents who are suing?
That's exactly right. There's a diverse coalition of parents all across Montgomery County, Muslims, Christians, Jews. And while they have disagreements on all matters of their religious traditions, the one thing they agree on is that parents get to direct the religious upbringing of their children, and that when schools are going and teaching matters that go to the core of a child's own self-understanding, who that child is when he or she looks in the mirror, that goes to the core of the parent-child relationship, and parents are the first teachers. That's what's at the core of this case. And it's also at the core of the constitutional protections that we're seeking to vindicate for them.
And it sounds like the parents, they're not saying these things can't be in schools or taught in schools, but they want to be able to opt their children out.
That's also absolutely right. This is not a challenge to the curriculum itself. This is not even just second guessing a choice made by the school board. The school board here gave parents, all of our parent clients had an opt-out available to them from these books that start as early as pre-K, teaching children how to identify, for example, sex workers at a pride parade. They had opt-outs available to them. They were being used. They were working. And then the school board on March 23rd just withdrew them and said, going forward, we won't tell you in advance when these books are going to be read to your kids, and you'll have no opportunity to opt them out. So what's at issue here is just restoring the policy that Montgomery County already had and was working.
So what's the best case scenario after Wednesday's hearing, Will?
The best case scenario is that policy that was working, that respects everyone, that allows for the opt-out policy to go back into place, will go back into place for the start of the new school year in Montgomery County on August 28th.
And just a few seconds left, but do you think this case could go to the Supreme Court?
I think it could. The Supreme Court has been very clear that there's an enduring American tradition of parents being the first teachers of their kids, particularly on matters that go to the core of who they are and their religious upbringing. This case implicates that, and the diverse cross-section of religious Americans and those of no faith who see the common sense of letting parents be the first teachers makes this a good case to vindicate that principle.
All right, Will Hahn with Becket Law, it's great to have you with us this evening. Thank you so much. And keep us posted.
Will do.
Well, from the campaign trail to the debate stage, August gearing up to be a busy month for presidential hopefuls. All things 2024 next on Faith Nation. Election 2024, the race for the White House is heating up just 5 months now from the first state primary. And it's a crowded field for Republicans trying to beat former President Donald Trump, who himself is trying to stay out of the courtroom so he can remain on the campaign trail. CBN's Hillary Powell is tracking how Trump's legal battles are affecting the race. Hi, Hillary.
Hi, Jenna. Well, former President Donald Trump remains widely popular with the Republican base as he is trying to seek a third time in the White House. He continues to spend much of his time questioning the outcome of the 2020 election, which is also at the forefront of his latest indictment. Many of his opponents continue to actually decline to confront him on his legal issues, which some people argue has allowed him to stay as a very strong frontrunner in the race for next year's GOP presidential primary.
Speaking before hundreds, 7 GOP hopefuls kept silent on Donald Trump's mounting legal cases during Iowa Representative Ashley Hinson's barbecue over the weekend. The candidates focused instead on presenting themselves as better alternatives to President Joe Biden.
Biden's policies have failed this country. We need to go a different direction. Here's our vision to reverse American decline. If that is the choice, we are going to win, and we are going to win across the country. If the election is a referendum on other things that are not forward-looking, then I'm afraid that Republicans will lose.
At a recent state Republican event in South Carolina, former President Donald Trump addressed new federal charges against him, arguing opponents are bringing the charges for political reasons.
The fake charges put forth by the Biden sham, we call it a sham indictment, and the man that's doing it, I really believe he's mentally ill. But these are outrageous.
Trump pleaded not guilty Thursday to crimes related to trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election. The Justice Department is charging him with orchestrating a scheme to block the peaceful transfer of power. Charges include conspiracy to defraud the U.S. government and conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. Trump's former Vice President Mike Pence is now his Republican rival for the 2024 presidential nomination. A magistrate judge warns Trump against attempting to influence witnesses, which could include former Vice President Pence, who testified before the grand jury. A recent Associated Press NORC poll finds only 22% of Republicans have high confidence that votes in the upcoming presidential election will be counted accurately, compared to 71% of Democrats. It underscores a partisan divide fueled by false claims related to the 2020 presidential election.
The RNC has set the first GOP debate date for August 23rd in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So far, 7 candidates have met requirements to be on stage. Jenna?
And joining us now, Julia Manchester, political reporter with The Hill. Julia, welcome. So what do you make of this AP NORC poll that finds only 22% of Republicans have high confidence that votes in the upcoming election will be counted accurately? What does it say about maybe the state of our country?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me because I think there's a lot of skepticism and concern among Republican primary voters about, how secure elections are. We know that election security and election integrity are a big part of, Republican concerns and part of their platform, too. We do know that it's something Republicans at leadership level have chatted quite a bit about. However, it doesn't surprise me on another front because we saw last week a CNN poll showed that about 68% of Republican primary voters believe that Donald Trump is actually the rightful winner of the 2020 election. So there's clearly, I think, a disconnect between the voters that are being polled on the Republican side and the majority of Americans who do say that elections are secure and that Joe Biden is the rightful president.
Yeah. Let's talk about Donald Trump. His polling, it seems, continues to just go up as these indictments get handed down, Julia. Do you think they're actually helping him more than they're hurting him?
From in the Republican primary sense, yeah, I think they are helping him. They take all the oxygen out of the field and they give him all this free earned media attention. And it also forces his rivals and those competing against him to have to answer for it. They're constantly asked about this when they'd rather be taught respective platforms or what they would do as president. So in a way, I think it's helping him on that front. And it also helps him could help him in a general election sense, because when you look at what's happening at the same time as Trump's legal issues, you're also seeing his likely opponent in the general election, President Biden, and his son, Hunter Biden, and Hunter Biden's legal issues as well. So it's easy for Trump to point the finger and say, look, I'm being treated by the Justice Department differently than Hunter Biden is. Now, there are lots of questions and obviously clear differences between, Trump's legal issues and Hunter Biden's legal issues. It's also notable that President Biden himself is not facing legal issues. This is his son. But it feeds into the messaging that Donald Trump has been pushing. That the investigations into him are essentially a political witch hunt.
Yeah. Just about 30 seconds left, Julia, but do you think Donald Trump will show up at the first Republican primary debate later this month?
Yeah, it seems like it's likely going to be a no. His team and he have telegraphed that he's leaning towards no. In fact, last week he said this could be a debate for who wants to be his vice president. But look, it's Donald Trump. He's unpredictable, so he could change his mind at the last minute or any time between now and then.
Yeah, so true, so true. Julia, it's always so good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, Sound of Freedom shocking at the box office. How the film is shining a much-needed light on the issue of human trafficking. All right, welcome back. The movie Sound of Freedom remains the summer's surprise box office hit. Over the weekend, the film passed $160 million in ticket sales. It was just barely beat out of the top 5 grossing movies for the first time since it was released more than a month ago. The film survived early criticism as it shines a spotlight on the tragic issue of anti-trafficking that anti-trafficking advocates have tried to expose for years. As Heather Sells reports, they are working to make the most of this opportunity.
It is the fastest growing international crime network that the world has ever seen.
Since its July 4th debut, The Sound of Freedom has not only generated unexpected box office success, it has opened eyes to a very dark world.
Our website numbers have just skyrocketed with people being interested.
My phone is blowing up every single day with all the questions and people wanting to ask those questions.
We've been inundated with phone calls and meeting up with potential donors and people that are very interested to learn what's happening right now here in the United States.
Longtime anti-trafficking advocates say the movie has brought incredible attention to the horror of this exploitation. They're now working to further educate those who want to understand what's happening in their communities and how they can help.
We take in referrals of women that are coming straight off the streets.
Survivor Lisa Michelle founded Untethered Ministries in San Antonio. She almost didn't see the movie fearing it would hit too close to home.
The little girl that was in the film actually depicts a lot of what happened to me as well, except for it was a trusted businessman in our neighborhood. It wasn't somebody who kidnapped me.
Since Sound of Freedom depicts trafficking overseas, Michelle believes it lost an opportunity to show the exploitation in the U.S.
We're missing the victims right in front of us. The victims that are working at our local stores and in our nail salons and massage parlors.
What we seek to do in all of our work is to elevate that survivor voice.
Brittany Dunn co-founded Safe House Project in 2018. She and other advocates regret efforts by those trying to tie the film to conspiracy theories. And they say now is the time to educate moviegoers who want to learn about trafficking at home. To that end, Safe House provides easy-to-access resources for churches, as does Shared Hope International and other faith-based nonprofits, like the International Justice Mission. It is unique in that it not only rescues and restores victims overseas, but also helps bring perpetrators to justice. Tim Ballard, whose work inspired the movie, has left the organization he founded and is advocating for nonprofits that rescue children around the world. He tells CBN News his desire now is to help fund others' good work.
We're going to use the power of this film and the awareness and people now motivated and converted and understanding. We got to channel that energy into more rescues to get more kids out and healed.
These children and young adults who've been exploited are the real heroes, say advocates. Most are never identified, let alone rescued or restored. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Thank you, Heather. And still ahead, a new age in agriculture hits America. Details after this. Finally tonight, taking agriculture to the skies. That's the business of Grip Custom Farming Corporation. The company started exploring the use of drones in farming about 2 years ago. Now they employ 20 student interns and 10 drones, each drone equipped with a 10-gallon tank and programmed to spray pesticides over fields. This season, Grip is using drones to cover 60,000 acres of farm fields. The company's long-term goal is to make it to 1 million. And that's going to do it for Faith Nation this evening. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.